Well, it's David Bereit, so he's probably going to tell us some things that are right. Oh, that was a horrible joke.
Ouch.
Well, I'm so excited. I don't know if you guys were here last year and got to hear David present on leadership, but he is SFLA's mentor. When we have problems, when we need to know what to do, we submit them to David for some advice. So I hope that you take everything he has to say today and really weigh it and consider it, because I know he's going to share some really good nuggets. So welcome, David Bereit.
Howdy! All right. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen? Are you fired up to be here at the Students for Life East Coast Conference? Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I am too. I love this conference. My family is here with me, and this is just one of those shots in the arms. I was just over at the Adult Leadership Summit, and I was just telling them, we need this as much as the students need this, and truly, it is an inspiration. You are an inspiration. And what I wanted to share with you today during our brief time together is how urgently we need you to lead. We need you not on the bench. We need you out on the front lines leading. And when you choose to lead in this crucial battle that we are engaged in, and make no mistake, it is a battle for the very soul of our nation. When you lead, you will illuminate America. And that's what leadership is. In our darkest of days, we need leaders who will be a light that will pierce through that darkness. And when you look back through American history, we see example after example during our nation's darkest hours of those few people who were willing to step forward and lead and illuminate our nation. From our very founding, when those men gathered together in Philadelphia, in Independence Hall to sign the Declaration of Independence. And they knew that by putting their name on that document, they were putting at risk their families, their reputations, their fortunes, their very lives. But they knew it was for something bigger than themselves. It was for freedom, and they were willing to lead. When we look throughout American history, we fast forward a little bit and we get to Abraham Lincoln, a man who led our nation through its darkest, most divided time, through the bitter days of the Civil War, and then to abolish that injustice of slavery for once and for all. It was a dark time, but Abraham Lincoln illuminated our nation, and our nation is forever better. We look at what we celebrated this past week, honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, and we think about leaders like Rosa Parks. She simply refused to give up a seat on a bus, and that illuminated an injustice, and it brought to light to our entire nation the problems that were happening with racial injustice and segregation throughout the South and throughout our nation. And a young pastor who had moved to town a year earlier was propelled into the national spotlight. And over that next decade, what happened? Dr. Martin Luther King illuminated our nation through a dark hour. Or we think about Ronald Reagan during his era as president, facing up against the godless atheistic communism that was spreading around the world. And for those of us who were alive during that time, I remember when Ronald Reagan went to the Berlin Wall and he stood before the Brandenburg Gate and he gave a speech where he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." And the media crucified him for it. They said he's trying to provoke a war. But that wall a few years later fell, symbolizing the demise of communism in much of Europe. And Reagan went back a few years after he was no longer president. And he was there with a pickaxe, taking a piece of the wall, breaking it off to take it back home, to put it in his presidential library. And a reporter said, "Mr. Reagan, did you think this day would come?" And he said, "Absolutely, I knew it would come. But even I didn't believe it would happen this soon." But Reagan and others who stood up against communism illuminated our world. Or what about a young woman who said, "Our college campuses are the target for the abortion industry. We need to be there to combat them." And through her leadership, she's illuminated 838 college campuses with Students for Life chapters. That's Kristen Hawkins, and she's illuminating our world. So that's what we need from you. With 57 million dead from abortion, 1/3 of your generation, we need you to lead. And this conference provides you the template. And the three themes that we are working through today are the roadmap for you to be effective at influencing other people. Truth, hope, and life. Let's look at each of those for just a moment. Truth. We need to accept the truth, we need to respond to the truth, and we need to proclaim the truth. And as an example of that, let me tell you about an 18-year-old homeschooled high school student in Memphis, Tennessee, named Devony Cooper. Devony had to accept the reality that abortion was right there in her hometown. She was a young woman, but as she began to research it, she found the largest perpetrator of abortions in her community was Planned Parenthood. And they had an abortion center that was located in a downtown office building on one of the upper floors. And she found out that the previous year, 2,305 children had perished at that abortion center. And she realized that each of those statistics was a child that had lost his or her life and a mother. And she had to accept that truth. She could no longer sweep it under the rug and pretend there wasn't a problem. She had to face it. But then she had to respond to the truth. And that's what you as a leader will need to do. She said, well, what can I do about it? She began to look at things that could be effective at helping to reduce abortions and save lives and work to close down abortion centers. And she stumbled onto 40 Days for Life. And she said, maybe I can do this. We can do 40 days of prayer and fasting and peaceful vigil and community outreach. So she went around and started talking to the people that she knew who were involved in the pro-life movement and said, somebody should do this, somebody should do this. And they all looked at her with that condescending look sometimes adults give you when you have great ideas. And they said, oh, Devony, we can't get people to go out once a month to pray at Planned Parenthood, 40 days. I don't think that'll work here. But she knew she had to respond to the truth. And so she decided, even though she was 18, didn't have a driver's license, was homeschooled, her mom agreed to take her to meetings. She said, I will do it. I will lead the local 40 Days for Life. She responded. And when they responded, she began to organize a team, and they said, we can't just accept the truth and respond. We have to proclaim the truth boldly throughout our city. And so her little team of people, most of whom were older than Devony was, they started to spread the word about their 40 Days for Life, and word began to spread through churches and schools. People started to get excited, except for one person who sent Devony a nasty email. It was the owner of the building who was leasing the space to the Planned Parenthood Abortion Center. And he said, I've heard about your plans, and I want you to cease and desist. I have other clients in this building who will be detrimentally affected by your plans. It will affect my financial well-being. There are other standalone abortion centers in Memphis. Move your 40 Days for Life, or else I will bring legal action. Now, Devony and her team had given their word to people. We're doing this. We're doing it at this location. And they said, as people of integrity, we have to do what we said we were going to do. And so they pressed forward with their plans and continued to spread more and more the word about 40 Days for Life. 2 days before their campaign kicked off, they found out that indeed that business owner made good on his word, and he filed a lawsuit against 18-year-old Devony, against her little team, against our 40 Days for Life organization. And he threatened all this compensatory damages he was going to collect for the financial harm that was being caused. So we got an emergency conference call, and we brought on our good friend Tom Brecka, the chief counsel at the Thomas More Legal Society, who has a table out here today. And Tom got on, and he was livid, and he said, they can't silence, this is free speech, you have a constitutional right to be there. And Devony and her team said, well, clearly we're making a difference or they wouldn't do this. Now, we would have all understood if an 18-year-old girl had said, too much, too overwhelming, can't do it. But she realized we have to proclaim the truth, and if we said we are going to do this, we must fulfill what we said. And they determined to press on, and they launched their campaign. More than 450 people participated during those 40 days in their efforts. On day 27, though, the legal battle was heating up. Tom Brecka had called me, said it would be probably good if you go in, prop up the troops, encourage them, and let's do a press conference and call on this guy to drop his frivolous lawsuit, but also let's prepare for the court battle. So I flew into Memphis, I got a rental car, I drove out to the site, and I was parking right by the building, and my phone rang, and it was Tom Brecka. And he said, David, I just wanted to share the great news with you. I just got off the phone with the attorneys for the building owner. I explained to them that I had fought free speech cases to the U.S. Supreme Court on 3 occasions and won every time. And I also explained that I was doing your legal support for free and that they were going to have to pay their attorneys. But I basically said, bring it on. And he said, for some strange reason, they've dropped their lawsuit. They're not going to do it anymore. So what was supposed to be a press conference calling this guy down instead was a celebration and a commitment to press on the final 13 days of those campaign. And what was the beautiful news, at the end of the 40 days, they had 5 confirmed lives saved from abortion because Devony led. And this is the even better part of the story. When Planned Parenthood's lease came up for renewal a few months later in that business, the owner said they are not worth all this controversy. He canceled their lease and kicked them out of the building. That young lady is no longer an 18-year-old homeschool high school student. She has now gone on and proceeded in her life, but she's here with us today. And right before I came on stage, Devony Cooper came up and said hello. I didn't even know she was going to be here. Devony, are you in the room? And if so, would you stand up so we can all recognize you? There's Devony right back there. She accepted, she responded, and she proclaimed the truth, and as a result, lives were saved. And that's what you need to do as a leader. But what about hope? You need to first know there's hope, and then secondly, you need to show there's hope. And let me give you another case study of hope. Let me take you across the pond to England, to a 26-year-old young man named Robert Cahoon. Right after Robert graduated from university, he decided to spend a year working for National Evangelization Team, Net Ministries, traveling across Canada. And he led a Net Ministries team there in Canada and went all over the country putting on retreats for young people. One of the cities they stopped in was Ottawa, the capital city of Canada. And while they were there, Robert, 2 days in a row, drove by right down from Parliament Hill there, an abortion facility, the Morgentaler Abortion Center, and he saw 10 or 15 people praying outside. He said, "What's this all about?" And they told him they were a part of a 40 Days for Life campaign. Robert had a glimmer of hope, not a lot, because back in his country in England, 200,000 abortions are performed a year. It's been in place for many, many decades. But Robert went back home after that year and began to research and found out more about 40 Days for Life. And he said, okay, I don't know if this will work, but maybe we could try and let's just see. Now, he lived out in the rural area, so he moved into London, where the greatest abortion problem was in England, and he got a job there, and he started 40 Days for Life. But all throughout the organizing, he wasn't sure, is this going to work? He had doubts, he had fears. They launched their campaign, and on day 2 of their campaign, a couple came in for an abortion. The girl went in, and the boyfriend stood outside. He began to talk to the prayer volunteers there, and they said, you know what? You can still go in and rescue your child right now. Go in and get her and bring her out here. And that man stood up and was a protector and a provider. And he ran in, he got that young lady, brought her out, and through her tears, she thanked them for helping her to get out of a situation she never wanted to be in. On day 2 of his campaign, Robert saw their first life saved. So at that point, Robert was a man on a mission. They finished that campaign. They had 6 other saves. But Robert knew we've got to do more. We've got to do more. They launched another 40 Days for Life in London, in Bedford Square, right in the heart of the city. And when they were doing that campaign, the auxiliary Catholic bishop of that diocese said, I'm going to come out and lead one of the hours of prayer out there. And 400 pro-lifers came, and 300 counter-protesters came out. And the media came, the BBC and Guardian and all these British media outlets came out, and they were documenting this. And you saw the contrast between these peaceful, prayerful pro-lifers and these vile, ugly, screaming obscenity pro-choicers on the other side. It got a lot of attention. The bishop's name, not ironically, was Bishop Hope, Bishop Alan Hope, and here we are talking about hope. But that generated so much media attention, and trust me, it was not friendly media attention. But in the midst of this, Robert was invited to go on BBC Live in front of 4 million people and debate the head of the abortion industry in England. Now, he's 26 years old. So he goes on, he's making his case for 40 Days for Life and why they're standing up for the unborn. And all this lady could say, kept coming back, as she said, you just need to go take your love somewhere else. That was her retort to him. So Robert took her at his word. And they've now spread 40 Days for Life to 20 cities across the UK. And through Robert's efforts, they've spread to South Africa, Romania, Nigeria, Croatia, Moscow, Russia. He took that love somewhere else and is going to continue taking that love somewhere else. But one young man, a 26-year-old young man, through his faith, has been an inspiration and provided hope to so many tens of thousands of people. He cites some of the greatest blessings of his efforts, getting to receive a letter from Pope Benedict saying that he was praying for him in his efforts there in London. And when he was in Rome, Robert got to personally meet Pope Francis and share the 40 Days for Life story. But Robert's biggest blessing he cites is when the Bedford Square Abortion Center in the heart of London shut down, went out of business, and he and a group of clergy got to go in and pray through every room and realize no more children will die here, no more women will cry here ever again. You can be the hope to thousands or tens of thousands of people. And the last point is life. Truth, hope, life. You, as somebody who's going to go home and lead on your campus, need to understand what this is all about. What is your reason for doing this? It's not to get accolades. It's not to be loved by the world. It's to save lives for all time. And that's what you have the opportunity to do. One final case study. Yvonne Viramontes was a lady who heard about 40 Days for Life. She lived in a suburb of Los Angeles in East LA called La Puente. And Yvonne signed up to do a 40 Days for Life. And when they held it, it was outside an abortion facility where the abortion center was so far back in the parking lot, they couldn't even interact with the people going in. So all they could do was simply pray and bear witness there. But they held a campaign, never saw any results. Held another one, never saw any results. But Yvonne kept hoping, we want to see a life saved. We want to see a life saved. 5 40 Days for Life campaigns, and they didn't see any tangible evidence. But after that 5th campaign, they got word that that abortion center had closed down and gone out of business. Yvonne called me so excited, and she said, can you and Sean Carney come out here? We're going to have a celebration. We're going to thank God for answering our prayers. And Sean and I flew out there. When we arrived there, yes, it was a joy to see that place closed and know it would never do any more harm to women or children again. But the greatest blessing was when we met 4 people. One was a tiny newborn baby. Next, she was being held by her mother, a young 19-year-old teenage girl named Laura. Next to her was the baby's grandmother, and next to her was the baby's great-grandmother. So 4 generations. And Laura, the mom, told us the story. Months earlier, she had been in an unexpected crisis pregnancy, and she had gone to her mom and said, I don't know what to do. Can you take me to an appointment at the abortion center? And her mom says, I don't believe in abortion. I don't want you to have an abortion. And Laura said, then Mom, tell me, what else do I do? And her mom didn't know about pregnancy centers, didn't know about alternatives. And so her mom reluctantly drove her to the abortion center. And when they got there, they drove past those people praying outside, and they went around back and parked by the abortion facility. And Laura was in the back seat, and she started to cry. She said, Mom, why are those people praying so loud? It's like they're yelling at me inside the car. And her mom turned around and said, they're praying silently. What are you talking about? The girl said, but Mom, I just wish I knew what to do. And her mom said, those tears, maybe that's God telling you what you know you need to do. Laura jumped out of the car. Her mom followed her. They ran to the 40 Days for Life volunteers, and then they went with them to the local pregnancy center. And Laura that day made the decision for life for her child. She gave birth to that little baby, a little girl she named Leah. And that day, outside of the now closed abortion facility, she introduced Sean and I to baby Leah, and we got to take turns holding her. That was a little over 3.5 years ago. This past weekend, I was in Los Angeles for the first ever citywide pro-life event in LA called One Life LA, and they had 10,000 people there. I was asked to give a talk from the stage there, and while there, I was able to share this story with the audience assembled. But then not only did I get to experience the blessing of seeing this life who is here today because of people who are willing to lead, I was able to introduce from the stage now 4-year-old Leah and her mom, Laura, who's getting married now to Leah's dad because she says this baby has brought so much joy into our life. And when they came out on the stage, Laura picked up baby Leah, not much of a baby anymore, and Leah was wearing a t-shirt which was shown on EWTN on worldwide television, and the shirt simply said, "Your prayers saved me." And that's the difference that you can make. Your prayers, your efforts can save lives. So my challenge to you when you leave here is make this not about today and yesterday. Make it about the rest of the year and what you do when you go back home. Determine that you will accept truth, respond to truth. You will proclaim truth boldly. Make a commitment that you will know that there's hope and that you will show that there's hope through your actions. And make a commitment you will do whatever it takes to be that voice for life. And when you do that, you truly will illuminate your world, and you will join join those historical figures of our founding fathers and Abraham Lincoln and MLK and Ronald Reagan and Kristen Hawkins as a great figure who was willing to do what it took in our darkest hour to be a beacon of light. So let us never grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Amen? Amen. God bless you.